What's up, folks? Casual Dad here with another Warhammer Combat Cards balance patch update. And just real quick, I'm also going to dip into the current ladder season. I'm recording this the day before all of this ends, or before the season switches over. And I wanted to also talk about the decks I'm running right now because I'm in the top 10%, pushing top 6% of decks for the first time in a while. So I wanted to go ahead and talk about how I got there and what I'm using and kind of the challenges I've hit, just real quick. But first of all, we've got the rewards for this season. The theme is for the Imperial Agents. And of course, to come out with the upcoming codex from Games Workshop, Warhammer 40K, we see quite a few characters included in the Battle Pass, some really, really strong ones. I knew Imperial Agents was coming out. I had missed that Deathwatch was included in Imperial Agents, so Deathwatch doesn't have their own codex at this point for 10th. It's been an interesting dialing back of that, where a lot of sub-factions got their own standalone codexes, and then now are being like looped back into the others, like Harlequins being a sadder example. But for something like Deathwatch, it's got to be very difficult to support and balance an entire faction of Deathwatch. And the more stuff they add to it, the more work it's going to be balancing it out. So I kind of understand that. But it's a big boon for those of us in Warhammer Combat Cards because it means that we get a bunch of Deathwatch in with the Imperial Agents. And there are some incredibly strong cards in this. Artemis himself, one of the best Space Marine warlords. This thing, whatever it is, really, really scary. Greyfax continues to have one of the best win rates in the game. And then, of course, Inquisitor Kodiaz, which is with his new artwork, which I've seen mixed reviews of his new model. But that is Inquisitor Kodiaz, the Psionic Blast Psyker, who's incredibly strong. And this guy I don't have, but he's good too. And of course, this being one of the most powerful Tolmaron cards in the entire game. So really strong Battle Pass. Let's talk about the balance changes too. Just as a quick aside, I actually this weekend got the chance to sit down and do an actual live interview with Harry, the Mad Emperor designer of the game, and we had a really good time. So look forward to that coming out in the near future. Hopefully, we'll see if it gets approved. Greetings, citizens. Last season's divergence from the usual schedule to celebrate the anniversary has drawn the attention of the Inquisition, and they've brought the full roster of the new Imperial agents with them. I mean, if you have to do the theme, why not have fun with it, right? Much like with the new codex, this season will focus on both elements from the Servants of the Emperor and Space Marine factions. Getting a nice 2-for-1. Nice. Hey, look at that. We're on the same page. While talking about the Imperial agents, there will not be any changes to which faction any of the bodyguards or warlords belong to. I like the caveat in there. I guess usually the battle passes are entirely single faction. I got all confused after the anniversary one because it was all over the place. But that's a fair point to include that. There will not be any changes to which, yeah. All cards are a member of the Imperial Agents Codex and will be getting, all cards that are a member of the Imperial Agents will be getting a new keyword to tie them together in the cross faction. So I may have overread on that. I think I mentioned before, I actually am getting a lot of my Warhammer 40K release news from Warhammer Combat Cards. So Deathwatch may still have their own codex. I could have been wrong about that. Sorry about that, Deathwatch players. For the wider changes, we've still got a good overall balance, but doing a little more focused spot balance for Tau and Chaos, who were a bit behind last season, and we'll get back to that. Finally, we're doing a huge catch-up on releasing cards to the general pool, and going forward, we'll be looking to do a much more regular and structured release. These will coincide with the balance changes as a neat and unified point at the season switchover. With all that, let's dive in. And I really appreciate that. There's always that kind of extra encouragement to spend money on the game by paying for cards you don't have, but there's not as much incentive of that to buy like 1 copy or 5 copies. You get level 3 of something. Was it worth the money? But if you're looking to go from like level 3 to level 6, that's different. And so that's from a financial standpoint, I understand why they haven't done this before. From a game design standpoint and just like quality of life, that's a very cool thing to have the general pool rotation like kicked back up. That's nice. All right, Servants of the Emperor. And this was funny. So this Psionic Blast, Servants of the Emperor are insanely powerful. They're some of the scariest decks in the upper ladder right now. I hit a 3,800 trophy Belisarius Call earlier today and just got stomped with one of the best decks that I could put together with my entire collection. I just got completely flattened by this thing. And these guys were some of the main characters who were responsible. So let's get into this. Esper and Lucarno being the cheapest of the 3 Psionic Blast Imperial Servants. Esper and all Servant Psionic Blast cards have had heavy nerfs and have been treated with a lot of caution. Fair. This was due to the Greyfax Psyker meta of some time past, but since Greyfax's readjustment, it hasn't been quite so oppressive. Greyfax is still a top 10 warlord, so it's nothing too significant, but should be enough to bring the Navigator in line with Cinemolar cards. And just to say, as a human player playing as Greyfax with the Psychic Blast Psykers, it still works beautifully. It's a fantastic deck and will get you very high on the ladder if you have Psionic Blast on this guy, which means you have level 9 or higher. But not a lot of people are playing Greyfax these days because people see her latest nerf as making her not good anymore. But she's really, really good, and Psyker Greyfax is still really good. So with these buffs, definitely time to revisit that. Iota, the Culexus Assassin, plus 30 wounds. As a quick reminder, too, this is the Fear one. He's got base trait of Fear, and he's epic. He has a secondary trait of Psionic Blast. For the same reason mentioned above, Iota has also faced nerfs in the past. As an epic, they're much more potent than Esperin and have better synergy with Call, who is still under review. I will say, hitting that top 10, top 6%, I'm seeing a whole lot more Belisarius Call Supreme Commander decks, and it is a very unpleasant experience. With that in mind, Iota's Psychic is not being increased, but a bump in wounds should make them a better disruption control piece rather than an out-and-out damage dealer. Now, that does nothing to make him not, or he, she, it, them, not a damage dealer. It's a very frightening piece. And the one I run Iota a lot, and it's got one of the best single target psychic damages in the faction. So it's still a really powerful damage dealer, even without gaining any bonus to attack. It doesn't need any bonus to attack once you get it to level 9+. Mine's very high level at this point. So May Lindy. Now, she was actually always my favorite of the assassins because something about the combination of cost and traits and stats. She's a really good piece, and I'm actually pretty surprised that she's not played more. But we'll get to that. I'm going to put her in every one of my decks now. May Lindy, Calidus Assassin, +2 range, +3 melee. So the base stats that I was already impressed with both got up. And again, the base increase will result in a leveled, dramatically higher increase. Trait change from anti-infantry and outflank, which is fine. It's still a really good trait. Anti-infantry triggers a lot and is really powerful against particularly the most common taunt cards in the game. But poison and furious charge is a dream combination. So you guarantee that you're going to poison something the turn she's played, even if she's immediately killed. Super strong in closing out those close matches and really, really good in kind of control poisoning an entire lineup in some of those longer drawn out matches like Rakarth or an Akaran. So that's, yeah. If you have a level 9 Melindy, good time. Because again, she's epic. So you do still have to have level 9 at least to get that secondary trait at all. But it's pretty great. Melindy is sitting as the least popular of the assassins. That's the part where I'm like, really? And she's had her traits mixed up a few times before, so people weren't taking her. Looking at some missing gaps in the Sisters of Servants of the Emperor, there we go, roster, switching Melindy to a card that can get an immediate poison off on the drop is going to be very valuable and means she can fill a number of roles. She's also a poison dealing card that has both ranged and melee, which is really powerful too. Furious Charge to clear lane, and then poison from the flanks, get an immediate poison off on a big target and take the hit to protect other cards and anything in between. Hopefully she has a good spot in some decks. There is now a very viable poison-heavy Servants of the Emperor build that is something we've never seen before. That opens up a lot of exciting options. Because but we have Draxus, the Inquisitor Draxus, who recently got poison and has had several buffs, will pair beautifully with this because they've both gotten pretty impressive buffs and have not been reviewed. So they're going to be very strong for a while. And we got our Grey Knights. Now, I've talked about this quite a bit, where the Grey Knights, it's very cool that they're Omni attackers, where they have range, psychic, and melee on most of them. They have all 3 attack types, but that holds them back because it puts them in a really challenging spot to balance. Because if you overpower them, if you give them too high of traits, then they have to be really expensive and you can't build decks around them. But if you weaken the damage too much, then they just don't do anything. So they've been a little bit on the don't do anything train for a while. We've got a couple changes here for these guys. First, the big guy, Paladin Paragon. Paragon Terramar Aurelian, +6 psychic, +6 melee, which is a big buff to both. And this is one of the guys who has a lot of hit points. So it's very, very good to have that on him. The Grey Knight's triple attack profile is part of their appeal, but it often leaves them short on power because balance. A good increase to psychic and melee should make a big difference, and leaving range as a more bonus attack lets the other 2 shine. Awesome. But yeah, I forgot to mention that this is 2 of the 3 Omni traits did not get a ranged bonus. I could see him, if he gets too powerful now, he could always do a psychic deep or a ranged nerf to make him a little bit less of a shooting card and more of the other 2. But his traits are have been quite low in general, that I think that this it's really good. I like that. Next up, we've got Apothecary Aralan. Got +1 cost, but also got a pretty good buff to both melee and psychic. Similarly, the Aralan, while useful as a psychic Medicae, was a bit flat on damage. So by adding just 1 point in cost, we've maximized the amount of damage we can add, making him much more formidable in combat. Brother Veron, Grey Knight's Battle Brother, -2 range, +4 psychic, +4 melee. Very nice. So this got the nerf to range. He's very cheap. I want to say he's 15 points, something in that range. Sticking in the same logic as Aurelian, using range as a bonus stack only means we can take a little off that side and increase the other two more significantly. So to make sure he's not totally undercosted for his stats, you reduce one, increase the others. You've got now a very affordable card that plays the way a Grey Knight really should. Another quick reminder here that we just recently, I think 2 seasons ago, it might have been last season actually, recently, we had a pretty big buff to Voldus, the Grey Knight Warlord. So he's dramatically cheaper. So with these three getting dramatically harder hitting, that pure thematic all Grey Knights deck feels a whole lot stronger in many different ways. So that's a double buff, very significant double buff to that deck 2 seasons running. I'm definitely going to try that out. That'll be fun. Tau. This is a good one too. I'm not even going to try that. Brute for Farstalker with Londoxy Tribble. God, what a name. +10 wounds. While still a relatively new card, the Farstalker has got an above average pick rate, but a notably below average win rate. Now, a lot of newer players, a new card is basically the same as an old card. Doesn't matter how new or old it is if it's the first one they've got. If we have a bunch of people picking up Tau, they would have this guy. And it's pretty exciting to have the option to run a lot of Kroot. So I can see him getting picked a lot, but he's got a strong attack and big game hunter, but he's probably struggling to stay on the board. Sure. He's also cheaper, so he's the guy you put in the dangerous spot to protect your other cards. So I could see him getting sacrificed a lot. But still, it's good to see him get better. He's obviously not an overpowered card. You know, it kind of makes sense to give him a buff. And then this thing, I think, is new enough that a lot of people just don't have it, and it's one that takes a really long time to level up, and also it's got a ton of competition in the slot with other cards that just perform better. But Shazla Hosen, Viorla, Tidewall, Gunrig. This thing always intimidates the heck out of me when I see it played. -2 cost. Perhaps a bit too expensive for what it delivers, the Gunrig is getting a cost reduction, leaving more room for extra goodies. Extremely good, of course, thematically with the colors, in a Supreme Commander Shadow Sun deck if you have it high enough level, because it's got a good ranged attack, it's got good hit points, and it totally makes sense to not move it because it's the wall. Excuse me. I got to call out this one. This guy has been around for as long as I've been playing Warhammer combat cards, at least 3 years, probably more, and we still don't know his name. Come on. Surely we know a name for him. We'll just call him Spot. Ready changed from melee debuff to melee buff, which I appreciate because, well, so I'm a little bit iffy on that. Well, let's read the description. The Kroot Hound is another popular but less successful card that had a number of iterations. The Furious Charge spot works well for it, but there are still very few cards that actively support melee for Tau, with very few cards that have a melee buff ready. Changing the Hound's ready gives it a bit more distinction and more support value. So I really appreciate that. But here's the thing. This is a mono attacker. So you can ready it either in Psychic or by shooting with your other cards. And if you shoot Tau, then have a pretty good offense, and this guy sits on the board, doesn't attack. The melee debuff is helpful there to help your Tau counteract the heavier melee decks. So it's a really strong defensive piece, which at the cost he's at is pretty great. From pure melee, I wonder how much of a difference this is going to have, because if you're running a really heavy melee Kroot deck, the only time he's going to ready is if you shoot, which you're going to be doing less of, or if you use a Psychic to just ready in general. So I think the utility is less than having him as a defensive piece in a ranged deck. I'm curious to see. We'll see how it works out. But I can also see him, because of his price point, being the piece that's slotted into a lot of decks that aren't. Nice way to say this. I could see there being some fallacies with deck building where people have a 5-point hole and they just throw in a 5-point card there, which makes for a weaker deck than it is if you change out 2 of your other cards to add 2 or 3 points to 2 of them. And not necessarily, right? But it's very common to build a deck that's less than great. You've got those 5 points hanging around. You just throw a 5-pointer in there, and then you're done. And could work well, but yeah, that is interesting. And I think he did recently get Furious Charge, which does make him a lot scarier. Curious to see where that goes. And anything for melee Tau is very exciting. I love the Kroot heavy melee Tau. I still hope one day we get some kind of Kroot warlord. That'd be fun. Chaos. Oh man, there's a lot of cool changes for Chaos. Gorecrawler, Greater Brass Scorpion of Khorne, -4 cost. One of the biggest and earliest of the Chaos Lords of War, and the newer knights. The newer knights, at the cheaper price point, seem to have the edge. I mean, the knights are cool. One thing I've always had with the Brass Scorpion is it's a cool looking thing, but it feels like it comes out of nowhere. Like where does a giant scorpion come from? Like, what is this? But whereas knights are still like, they're now very quickly and like intrinsically dialed in part of the lore. They fit in with stuff, you understand them, they have the equivalent in the Imperium side. There is nothing else in the game anywhere that looks even remotely like this. It's one of the best early Forge World designs, but it's clearly an early Forge World design from a whole line of stuff that never materialized. So it just feels out of place. And that's one of the big things with it. I would use this sucker all the time because the attack is incredible. While they still can't match Gorecrawler for out and out offensive power, a bit of a price cut should allow more opportunities to claim skulls for Khorne. Like, this card is amazing, but very few players have it. Very few players bought it because it hasn't been in the general pool. And it's one of those things you have to level up before you can actually play it to any reasonable level. So I wonder, the -4 cost is going to be great. Like, no two ways about that. I'm going to roll with that for sure. But I don't know if that's why it has a lower. And now the edge, that may be played win rate as opposed to play rate. I don't know. We'll see. But I mean, appreciated getting a cost reduction. It's definitely not making a splash in the game. It could, though. I'm a little concerned about how scary that thing is. These next two, I'm going to throw them both up at the same time. These are two that have not had an impact in my play at all, despite me having one of them for a long time and one of them recently, but just like not even giving it a second thought, because it's a piece that certainly could be powerful, but the way it has been built, it hasn't really made sense. Especially because I have always thought of it as a beefy taunt card, because I only ever used it in max level campaigns where I play it. It has taunt. That's the defining thing about it. But it's epic, and it has its secondary trait was taunt. We'll get to the change in a second here. And that was always a little bit strange to me, because when I played it in max level campaigns, it had a clearly defined role. I guess it has a good gun, it's a powerful piece, but I play it as a taunt to keep my other stuff alive for the full 2 turns of taunt. But then being vulnerable to Big Game Hunter, and also being vulnerable to Big Game Hunter was always a little bit iffy. But then also when I actually played mine outside of max level campaigns and it didn't have taunt, that was very confusing that taunt is the secondary trait. But so its changes: -5 cost, -30 wounds. So made it squishier, but also removed the vulnerability to Big Game Hunter. And then changed the trait to primary taunt and then secondary Big Game Hunter. So it's not going to max out Big Game Hunter anymore, but it is going to max out taunt. And with something with that many hit points at that cost, you really need to get that value out of taunt, because you're not always going to get anything out of Big Game Hunter. You will always get something out of taunt. And something that has that many hit points with taunt opens up all kinds of options. I really still keep trying to get ranged chaos to work really effectively, and this is something that will really help. Yeah, Iron Malice is an interesting card that didn't quite hit the mark, being the only taunt card over 40 points, excluding the very scary Blood Angels thing, Lord of War. And with taunt being the secondary trait, it often defeated its own purpose with a weaker damage reduction, because it maxes out at taunt level 2, and a vulnerability to Big Game Hunter. All right. Is now out of Big Game Hunter range at 39, and has had a chunk of health removed to compensate. Additionally, having taunt as a secondary trait drastically changes the role of the card midway through its progression. I believe Harry talked about how he played this card up to level 8 as a actual ranged damage dealing tank, and then hit level 9, and all of a sudden it had taunt, and it was dying when it was one of his main damage dealers. Always felt a bit off. Now it should feel much more like a serious protection unit that can deal with some potent retaliation damage at higher levels. Nice. That rounds out the balance changes, and now, and there is the Servants of the Emperor, one of the Imperial Guard Baneblades has taunt too, and that was always a bit of a weird one, but that one is a Lord of War. So higher levels. That rounds out the balance changes. Now there's the full list of cards being added to the general pool. Nice. Split them out by factions. Oof, man, no pictures, but this is a long list though. Drukhari Raider, and I'll just say that the type, because the names are going to be harder to remember. We've got the Guardian Defender, the cool red defender, very nice. Striking Scorpion Exarch, very similar to the Striking Scorpion we have already with target acquired, but just with much better stats at a slightly higher cost. And the Night Spinner is the new big Falcon Wave Serpent Chassis Barrage card. That thing is extremely scary. That's the dark green one with the little veins on it that does Barrage. Tau, we've got Invocation of the Elements. I have no idea what that is. Sorry, guys. The Hunter Strikes. I assume that's a bigger fruit, probably riding something. And this is, oh, this is one of the ethereals. Yeah, okay. I don't know which one. Sorry, guys. Techno-Archaeologist, nice. Servants of the Emperor get a bunch. The Rhino, so the taunt vehicles have not had made much of a splash yet, but they're in the game, and they're ones that definitely can. If you get them leveled up, we're talking about taunt cards with a bunch of hit points. It's massive how much of a difference they make. We've seen the power of the game kind of, it's gotten a little bit more lethal in the past year or two, and the high hit points taunt cards have a lot more value than they used to, despite being more expensive. But a lot of the new ones, like the Rhino, like the Harlequin Flyer, like the Raider above, they are very, very powerful taunt cards, and they're not costed too aggressively either. So I'm excited to play with them more. Tech Priest Engines here, Vexilus Praetor, nice. The Ordo Malleus Inquisitor. Skitaria Marshal, Cataphront Destroyer. So we get the other version of the tanky wheelie robot. Adeptus Iron Strider. Oh yeah, the other walker. Yep. Scorpius Disintegrator, Scorpius Dune Rider. Ooh, and Sidonian Scratros. Y'all, and I mean the names, man. Adeptus Mechanicus names are just all over the place. They're nuts. All right. Dark Angel's Inceptor, nice. Ultramarines Librarian Terminator, I believe, no. Apothecary Biologist, Veteran Infiltrator Lieutenant, a lot of Primaris stuff here. Ultramarine Sternguard Veteran, let's see where he is. Ultramarine Sternguard Veteran Sergeant, Salamanders, Terminator. A lot of these I have because they were free rewards for campaigns. So I got a lot of these guys, but having them in the general pool would be really nice for the players who didn't and to kind of help grow it up. This guy, oh no, I have that one. He's the shielded Terminator. That's really good. Terminator Sergeant, Imperial Fist Captain, Darnath Lysander. Ooh, yeah, getting him in packs will be great. I don't have him. This one, that's the Regen Bolt Rifle Imperial Fist Heavy Intercessor. That guy is terrifying. Really excited to have him for some of my heavy infantry range decks. Of course, I want to put him in a Tolmeron for those Howling Griffins theme, but he also will be really, really good in quite a few other decks. Then we got Sentinel of Terra, the Imperial Fist Repulsor, Deathwatch Veteran, Rodriguez Grit, Crimson Pedro Cantor, yep. Crimson Fist Imperial Space Marine, Raven Guard Librarian, and Phobos Armor, nice. Landspeeder Storm, Salamander's Captain, Vulcan Histan. I don't have him and I really want him. He's a character that got me into Salamanders in the first place. Fury of Nocturne, the Thunderfire Cannon, White Scar's Attack Bike, Landspeeder Tornado, Infernus Marine, the Flamethrower Marine, Scout Hunter, Raven Guard Scout with Heavy Bolter, Deathwatch Codice. This is the librarians in the Battle Pass, by the way. Nightmaster, ooh, cool. Deathwing Terminator, Phobos Lieutenant, the Thousand Sun Zangor, the Dark Apostle, ooh. Putrefier, another poison card for the Chaos. This guy is awesome. He's the free reward for the Corn campaign on right now. Let's definitely pick that one up. And Shalaxi Hellbane, the other Keeper of Secrets. And the Keeper of Secrets is a terrifying piece in Chaos. So to get two of those, that's a big deal. I don't have that, or I don't have them. That'll be a pretty wild one. Godrang, Goth Clan, and Mega Armor, Burn a Bomber. Oh yeah, the other flyer. Den Knight before Squigmas. I read that one. That is huge. It is massive every time a red Gobbo is added to the game because those have such utility. Oh, let's do them. Oh god. Okay. Yeah. Oh. Pumped. Clan Truck. We got the Winged Tyranid Prime, excellent piece. Target acquired and melee ready. The Neuro Tyrant is excellent. I did buy that Battle Pass, and this one has fear and a heavy melee. This one has fear and does have Psionic Blast at trait rank 2. It is epic, so it takes a minute. Then we got the Neuroloid, Von Ryan's Leapers, crazy melee for the 12-point cost. Neurogaunt, Node Beast, Barb Gaunts, Psychophage, Pyrovore, Neurolictor. That's the one. That's the fear heavy melee. That one's cool. Norn Assimilator. Ooh. That one and this one, that's two super heavies being added to the whole list. And then the Termagants are very good utility pieces. One has target acquired, one has poison. Excellent. And then the other high call would be great to fill out my I get it. The new Kotiaz is not my favorite design, and the old one was pretty cool. I honestly just don't know what to make of this. Like, he just looks oddly baby-like. I don't know what it is, and I don't know where that comes from. It may be some old artwork for him. I don't know.
The Inquisition codpiece, though, does feel a little bit thematic. Somewhere between a belt buckle and a codpiece feels very very Texan. His thumbs in his belt, just hiking that sucker up. Yeah. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and switch over to the game itself. Hopefully y'all can still see this. I'll check the video before I jump in here. 8 minutes left or 8 hours left in the battle pass or left in this season. I have been running Orcs, Tyranids, Eldari, and Chaos, and very proud of my trophy count here. Right now I'm sitting at, where do I see this? All the different places to click. Position 195, proud of that. And I am in the top 10%. If you want to break from the top 10% to the top 6%, you want to run your most powerful decks and change stuff as little as possible because you really want that iteration, that repetition. You want decks that have at least a 7 out of 10 win rate. Your 70% win rate, where 7 out of every 10 match you have is a win. That's positive progression. If you dip into 6 or 5, you will not progress at all. 6, you'll barely progress. You get to 7. If you're an 8 or 9 where you're winning 80 to 90% of your games, then keep on going until you hit that wall, because there's going to be a wall where you kind of get shut down a bit. I'll go bottom to top. For Chaos, I've been running my Supreme Commander Abaddon the Despoiler, which is really great, and I love the deck. I believe, let me check this. Yeah, this is the one. This is a deck that I really enjoy because it represents sort of everything. You've got your Chaos Demons, you've got Tzeentch, Khorne, Nurgle, and Slanesh all represented, plus a shield card for extra defense, and a little guy to kind of throw in there. Note they are almost entirely the same ready type. I did mix in Lucius just because he's so freaking good, which does kind of hold back Abaddon's traits, or Abaddon's ability, because you don't get the same ready type. You don't get those phenomenally overpowered melee readies whenever you get a kill. So very powerful deck. I really like this build, and I got getting that dip into fear. Typhus is now a staple of many of my Chaos decks and is incredibly strong once you get him up to this level. And this is really critical. That level of melee damage, that fear, that is a huge transformation in his power level from being kind of passable to like excellent. And this is really great to get there. So, but really that I hit a wall with that because Abaddon himself is only level 3. So I think I have, fear level 2, inspiring presence level 1. So he just doesn't have the staying power. I mean, if I get him to about here, and especially there, like that's the sweet spot where he's going to become truly competitive, but it's going to take a while to get there. So he was really good, and then I switched over to Ahriman, and one of the reasons I'm starting with Chaos is it's the one I've struggled with the most, and one of the ones that I have tried the most too. So I've hit that 6 out of 10 win rate where I've sort of treading water, where I have a couple wins and then they get wiped out. So this is the deck I've been running a lot, very heavy Psykers. This guy got a buff recently. This guy's one of the best cards in the game. That extra point on the Medicae is really important, and him having Psychic, but this one, unfortunately for me, is only level 2. So I needed to get him closer to here with that higher Psychic attack, higher hit points, and then also the rank 3 Medicae to make him very useful. And of course, this guy for the poison. Once I get this guy up to where he has Psionic Blast, and I'm just pumping this guy full of wildcards, those two are behind in levels, and that has been holding me back. Throwing moons or neems back in there was really, really helpful recently. So this is the best thing I've built for this guy in a while, but still maybe 7 out of 10 wins. So the time investment is just dramatically higher. Going up the chain, who's next? Next up is Eldari, and that is nowhere near the ceiling. I really should be playing more Eldari. I just haven't for a bit. I've been playing Lilith just because I do still think that she's probably the best of the Eldari warlords, just hands down. And just looking at this, this is a variant of what I've done before, but it's really heavy on the ranged, especially those on the drop ranged attacks with both that level 9 Mogan Ra, who has barrage and precision shot. So he's shooting on the drop and also doing adjacent damage to strip shields or take out injured cards. I've got this guy in here because the points work out well, and he's got that Psionic Blast for the utility. Also has a very high ranged attack now at this level. Now that my levels have gotten high enough to where this guy has the hit points, has the range damage, he's actually a decent piece in there. But I may still switch that out for the precision shot. Because precision shot, those on drop abilities are incredibly powerful with Lilith. And this guy here has the much higher single target damage, and I have trait rank 3 of the precision shot and has more hit points, but comes in at 3 points more. So I'd have to shuffle something around here a bit. I mentioned the high hit point, slightly higher cost taunt cards. This guy is super low level. He's been working really, really well, this Moon Judge. But once I get him here, that becomes a dramatically more powerful piece. But it's really been good in there because I have Taunt in the deck just to keep stuff alive, and it hasn't been enough. It's either been too expensive with the Vizark or isn't in theme. So I've had a lot more success going pure range damage as opposed to mixing melee and ranged. So, and ranged has barrage and other ways just to do adjacent damage that melee still can't stack up with. So the most powerful competitive Lilith decks I can do really lean heavily on range damage, especially on the drop range damage. And target acquired is a very important piece. So I had the more expensive target acquired in there, but just recently switched this guy in. And again, you're seeing a lot of lower level cards, but this deck can hang where the last ones could not. Just because those are kind of low level utility pieces, my really key damage dealers are all very, very high level. So that was very helpful. Let's see, next up should be Tyranids. Yes. Yeah. No surprise there. I'm leaning heavily on the Parasite, which has been really cool because the Parasite continues to be one of my favorite cards in the entire game. Certainly one of my favorite Warlords to play, but also that recent buff has made him just so strong. And this right here, I really like this deck because it spreads the bulk across the deck very dramatically. Having that Endless on Old One Eye and the very, very high hit points on this guy, plus Death Blow, which also does chain the Death Explosion abilities, will both apply Infest, will apply the Infest rule from the Parasite, but then also will trigger extra Death Blow. So it just is this awesome chain reaction where he goes, applies Infested to a couple other cards, and then they blow up and do a bunch of adjacent damage. So very powerful piece. Plus comes with that Berserk. So he just charges up that thing until it lands. So those two are absolutely amazing. This guy have at very high levels just does so much damage and is very good at finishing off or very quickly taking down high value targets. So this deck all in all is really strong and one of the best ones I've built with the Parasite. So that one could easily be played a little bit higher. We'll see if I have the time before the season ends. And finally, this one's been great. I've actually really struggled with orcs for a long time to get past that 3K ceiling. You can really feel how much more challenging games get once you get over 3,000 trophies, because it starts pairing you up against really, really strong decks. Especially as the season gets later, you go up against the really powerful stuff. And the higher you go, the more likely you are to be matched up against an opponent who is lower ranked, has fewer trophies than you. And if their trophies are lower than your trophy count, then if you lose, you take a much higher penalty. And vice versa. If you beat them, you don't get as much of a lead. That's been improved, but it still is definitely a thing that continues to influence like whether you're climbing up or not in the ladder. So I recently tried a different tack, and I have been busting out the Mad Emperor's very favorite, Snickrot. That is not the deck I've been running. This is the deck I've been running. And a couple things about this. So obviously target acquired is really powerful with Snickrot because any card does double damage if it deals damage to an adjacent lane. So Barrage hits twice as hard on adjacent lanes. Psionic Blast does twice as hard, and anything you hit with Precision Shot is gonna get taken down. And now a couple things about this though. I have the 2 Precision Shots in here. It's heavily leaning on ranged, where all but one of these cards, or all but these 2 in the middle, are ranged heavy, and Snickrot himself. I've got Snickrot at a high enough level where he has both that Furious Charge, just it's meh, but then his high level Fear gives him more chance to stay on the board. But the real secret sauce of this is I've got a bunch of cheap cards that were recently buffed that has a ton of damage. Both of these guys recently got dramatic buffs to their damage that they're putting out. I've got them up to very high levels. This guy sort of snuck up on me. I had him for a long time and didn't realize what high level he was until very recently. Those last couple damage buffs really pushed him up. And I think he did actually recently get a buff as well. Has Barrage, is only 12 points, so you don't mind losing him, but he does a lot of damage as he goes down. Also got this guy very similar. I know this guy just got a buff. 8 points for 44 range damage plus Barrage. Very good for the cost, especially because he just slots so well into this deck. But the 2 pieces that really make this one stand out are the 2 with Precision Shot. The reason being, you drop this very powerful Precision Shot down to kill the card across from it, and then you have a guaranteed shot to either flank, where this guy will do over 200 damage. He'll do 250 damage off lane, either through target acquired or through a follow-up to Precision Shot lane clear. Like this guy will just burn through stuff like nobody's business, especially after his recent buff. So this deck, I could probably hit 5K trophies with this guy, no problem at all. I am undefeated for the past couple weeks of play. I just wanted to mix it up a bit. So extremely strong, very high level cards and quite a few of them, but most of these are This is the only competitive deck I just ran through that does not have a single legendary in it. Not one, none of them, which is very cool. So a lot of rares, 2 epics, but mostly rares and a couple commons. Like a third of the deck is commons. So this is a really cool deck. It's the poor man super competitive deck. Yeah, very proud of this one. Wanted to be sure to highlight it. So this is, it's good stuff. But anyway, there we go. We're about to see the end of this season and the new one starting probably after this video, actually. I'm going to go ahead and post this for first thing tomorrow morning. And yeah, see you next season.